Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and this is very, very important discussions, and this is very important right now for nanotechnology. Different organizations, they request us to know more about nanotechnology. That's why I arranging these sessions. We have our expert panelist on that, Professor Edwards. He can explain about nanotechnology and impact of nanotechnology. We have our other panelists, Mr. Brent Ellman, who always support World Talent Economy Forum, as well as our best friend, Ali Rice. So I want to start from Professor Edward. How do you want to analyze this nanotechnology, how it works, how it, like we can make a bridging, because it's important. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Well, this is a very interesting topic. When we think about exponential technology, often we're thinking about machines. That's all very important. We're thinking about artificial intelligence. We're thinking about robotics. And these are all very important issues. But nanotechnology is one of the key factors that's driving the exponential technology revolution. First, maybe a few words about what exactly it is for your listeners. Nanotechnology really deals with manufacturing at a micro level. We think of building a machine like the machine you're probably watching this broadcast on, but we're talking about literally building molecule by molecule. The concept came from a physicist, an American physicist named Richard Feynman, very famous physicist who really discovered some of the fundamental laws of matter. And he made a famous challenge about how small can you build a machine. And this is the notion of there's plenty of room at the bottom. We think of building big machines. He said you could build very, very small machines. And the real pioneer in the United States in this issue, he was the theorist, was a gentleman who's still active. I believe his headquarters is in Texas, Eric Drexler, who wrote a book, I think it's about 20 years ago now, on we can do it nanotechnology, literally manipulating matter at the micro level. When you think of nanotechnology, think of two things that can be done with it that are very, very important. First of all is material production. That is to say, creating new materials. To give you an example, two very desperate examples, but both concern nanotechnology. About a year or two ago, an artificial kidney was produced using nanomaterials, materials that allowed the manufacturers, this is an experimental technology at the moment, to make an artificial kidney, but part of the material included was nanomaterial. Incredible. And so what this might mean is that in the future, we won't need kidney dialysis machines for people who have kidney problems. Right now, as you probably know, as your listeners know, people who have serious kidney problems or kidney failures either have to get a transplant, and there's not enough organs to go around, or they have to go several hours per day, 2-3 days a week, just to sit and let a machine, purify, their body because the kidneys aren't working. Imagine a kidney, artificial kidney, you can transplant into your body. No need for those machines. This is incredible, but it uses nanofibers. Here is something that seems completely different from producing a kidney that nevertheless has to do with nanotechnology, and that is producing a space elevator. This is something that has been celebrated in the past in science fiction, but this is a book I got, it's about 20 years old now, when I was doing space policy by a couple of scientists who'd actually researched the idea of building literally an elevator that goes from the ground all the way up, well above orbit, where you can put an elevator going up and down. So instead of launching spaceships, that's how you would get up and down. It's been celebrated in science fiction. The Fountains of Paradise by Arthur C. Clarke, who sets it in Sri Lanka. So if we have Sri Lankan listeners, take a look at Arthur C. Clarke's wonderful science fiction book. But why this might be possible in the future is the idea of producing nanocarbon materials that you can literally stretch from the ground to outer space. You would have a counterweight that's up there to hold it up, and this is only possible because of nanotechnology. That's materials production with nanotechnology. The other important thing with nanotechnology is making machines, micro machines. And a couple of examples of that is, for example, micro machines that can go into your body and do various things. For example, one of the biggest problems dealing with the human brain is the brain blood barrier. It's very difficult to get medicines into the human brain. And that's good because it also means it's very difficult to get viruses and bad stuff into the human brain as well. And we don't want that to happen. But it also poses a problem, of course, when you're trying to cure a disease and so forth. And one of the things that experimenting with nano machines is something that can go through that blood brain, that barrier, get into your brain and actually do stuff, deliver medicine, or a machine that can deliver medicine or something literally to the different cells in your body, or respirates that could go into your lungs and basically allow you to be able to breathe much, much better than any human being. And I'm making the connection right now. This is an experimental area, but imagine these nano machines in the future. If somebody gets coronavirus, and hopefully we'll all be vaccinated so we won't get virus, but we know viruses are going to come in the future, right? So imagine that as a treatment. In other words, one of the problems with getting the virus is your lungs. Most people die because of some sort of a lung situation. With these nano machines, these nano respirates or breathers, you could possibly simply inject those into somebody's lungs and you wouldn't have that sort of problem. My own father has suffered from lung problems. Fortunately, he's on the mends right now. But again, machines, materials, this is the kind of excitement that you see with the development of nanotechnology and the possibilities that an entrepreneur can start thinking about how to use nanotechnology.
Excellent, excellent. This is very good session. I believe that those who are observing today's session, please share as much as possible because I know you have many questions and you can get the solution through this session. Mr. Brentelman, so how do you want to analyze this point? And if you can give some specific example of nanotechnology from the industry and how it works.
Sure thing. Yeah, thanks for having us on, Sharif. Yeah, so nanotechnology, as Edward was saying, is of course technology at a really small level. An example of some nanotechnology that has intrigued me are these living programmable nano robots they call xenobots. And xenobots are created with actual animal cells, stem cells of different organs and things like that. Most notoriously, there were some xenobots that were produced last year that were made out of frog cells. But as Edward was saying, these nanotechnologies, one of the greatest applications for them is in biotechnology research for medical use and things of that nature. And, one example Edward mentioned, of course, is the blood-brain barrier and the difficulty of crossing it, getting into the brain and such. But another difficulty that exists is our own body's defense systems will attack certain things that enter the system. And so these types of xenobots, you could actually use your own body's, organic material, your own organs, and your body would theoretically be able to think that that's just a part of you. And these robots, they're, small, independent, programmed bots that are able to do a multitude of functions. So, if you needed, them to repair a tear in your heart or something like that, it's, the possibilities are pretty endless here. But that's one example.
Thank you. Madam Ali.
Okay, so as usual, I'm kind of still on the ethical kind of cynical side to a certain level. So I can see how amazing it is and kind of the possibility, but I still think that there's kind of harnessing your own body's power to heal, and sometimes it feels like we tend to kind of take intervention as something that we need to adhere to, as opposed to looking at kind of a more holistic way of thinking. So I think it's exciting, but we still need to harness our own potential first, as well as trying to keep intervening with other things. And for me, even the vaccine, I know it sounds quite controversial, but I think our own natural immunity is really important as well. And essentially, most people don't get affected by COVID-19 unless they've got underlying conditions. So I think, our own health and well-being needs to be established so that we healthily and we take care of ourselves and we exercise. And, so it's so essentially for me, there has to still be an ethical kind of way of kind of dealing with everything as well. And it is exciting, the nanotechnology. But essentially, it's scary to me that they're making robotics to invent bees that can pollinate a flower, because we might lose the bees. So essentially, we still need to preserve and protect nature as well, because we can't function without it. And essentially, I don't think it should be, we shouldn't be developing alternatives. We should try and still kind of make sure we optimize the potential and power we've got as well. So I think there's kind of a natural side and phenomenon to our health that we need to harness. And it does make sense, when things go wrong, that it's incredible that we can, instead of harvesting organs, we can kind of make them, as opposed to or rely on dialysis. So but essentially, so I'm kind of a real kind of nature girl that realizes, I've practiced yoga since I was 14, and I just turned 53. And essentially, I just think that there's incredible power to harness, naturally, that some of us neglect to see. And that's all about making good decisions and lifestyle choices, I think. So, yeah. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Professor Edward, yeah.
Yeah, actually, in a sense, I don't think we disagree. I believe in all of the above. When we're talking about, in other words, when I'm taking a look at the human individual, my background actually is in philosophy and ethics, even though I have obviously science is a big part of what I've studied. And so to me, it's not just one or the other. It's all of the above. I'm trying to get my 10-year-old twin daughters, fraternal twin daughters, to do more yoga, by the way. One of them has issues, and I'm saying, here's a way you can focus. You do this and you do that. And so that you have that internal discipline. I appreciate, for example, when we talk about the coronavirus, is building up natural immunity. That includes using vitamins. Vitamin D apparently is a D3, I think is the one that's really good about that. Exercise for every human being is terribly important. I jog for about 50 minutes a day, and I listen to wonderful books when I'm jogging about all of these things that we're talking about right now. So to me, it really does start with the individual human. But remember, humans are tool makers. That's one of the things that distinguishes us from most other animals. I love one of my favorite movies is 2001: A Space Odyssey. You can see my pictures on the wall up here if you're looking at it. And it starts out with an ape discovering, unfortunately, it's how to use a bone to beat someone up and then to get food. But that's what distinguishes us, is our minds can figure out how to make stuff, how to take the works of nature and make a tool, make a hammer, make a plow so that we can produce more crops, so that we can eat and not starve to death, produce a weapon so that a saber-toothed tiger can't eat us, these kinds of things. But also do the things that we're talking about with nanotechnology. I want to put this in a wider context also, because on all of the issues we discuss on this show, wonderful show, and I urge everybody to tune into every episode. Whether you're talking about artificial intelligence or robotics or the sort of medical breakthroughs that I'm very interested in, or nanotechnology, we have in a sense, a philosophical discussion between what's called the precautionary principle and the proactionary principle. The precautionary principle is a kind of state of mind that the way I define it is never do anything for the first time. In other words, it's this extremely conservative principle of, something could go wrong. If we in our caves produce this thing called fire, we see this we see this lightning producing fire. I guess we could cook our food, but then again, maybe our cave would catch on fire. Maybe someone would take this thing called fire, and use it as to burn down our forest. Maybe so. Let's be very careful about whether we actually use fire. Well, if that were our mindset, we'd still be in the caves. Okay, and we see that unfortunately today, where I could trace through some of the history of biology and medical breakthroughs, and show how a lot of medical breakthroughs have been kept back because of the precautionary principle. We have a Food and Drug Administration in this country that is so conservative that the vaccines for the coronavirus were developed months and months and months before they were available to the public. Thousands and thousands and thousands of people suffered and died, while the Food and Drug Administration was saying, well, we do see this little problem here, so we got to take some more time to do this. Literally, people are literally dropping dead, and they're being very conservative because of this precautionary principle. The proactionary principle is basically the idea is you move ahead, you assume that we're going to do good things with technology and with our minds. We keep our minds open also to the dangers, and if we see a danger, we try to deal with it as it develops. If we see that there are other serious problems, then we deal with them. But we don't hold back because there is a huge cost in doing nothing. And so with nanotechnology, my message is if you're an entrepreneur, especially in the Asian Pacific area, which is becoming a very dynamic economic area, think about how you might use nanotechnology, how you might incorporate it. If you're an individual, yes, understand the possibilities of nanotechnology helping you as an individual, but also consider Ali's very important point that all of it comes down to you have to discipline yourself as well to make the best life for yourself. I'm an individualist. In the United States, people call me a libertarian. In other countries, you call me a liberal, meaning I believe that government should basically leave us alone to the greatest extent possible so we can live our lives, we can realize our dreams, we can have exciting lives with our friends, our families, our communities, and all. But it all comes back down to us as individuals. But don't deny the technology. Let the technology go ahead. Let the technology progress. Be careful, of course, but let's be real progressives.
Thank you. Excellent. We have our new friend Oshnakati joined with us. Hello, Oshnakati. How are you? And how do you want to analyze today's sessions? We are discussing on nanotechnology. Can you unmute, Oshnakati? Mr. Brent, I think.
Sure. Yeah, I was agreeing with both of what Edward and Ali were talking about, or Ali. Yeah, I think that it's absolutely important to keep all this in mind. I don't think that we should be ignoring any of these essential. I don't do yoga, but I do meditate about 45 minutes a day. So I think that there are, really incredible benefits for those types of things. There's a lot of evidence that, things like meditation can improve stem cell growth in the body, help expedite all sorts of healing, mitigate conditions, things like that. So I really think that what Ali was saying is absolutely essential. Keeping care of our body, not being overly scared of germs and things like that. It's good to expose ourselves in a certain level. But the word that comes to mind when I also consider what Edward was saying is, the moral imperative. I think that there's a fallacy, a logical fallacy, the either or fallacy that's defined by the idea that you have two options and you take one of is we have this moral imperative to continue to progress medical science. Imagine if the world just didn't change, the medical science world didn't change over the last 100 years. You still have doctors, prescribing cocaine for bad blood. Probably wouldn't be a good thing. And so with that in mind, I think that it's really important to continue the progressive motion that we're taking as a society. And I think that these technologies are important. People have all these concerns. People will cite things like black goo, these like self-aware, self-replicating things, that are basically nanotechnology. And people talk about the paperclip problem. What happens if you have a bunch of nanotechnology that's self-replicating that just keeps replicating, especially if it's able to consume things in its environment. I was reading yesterday about a robotics project where these robots that were designed by the US government were consuming organic matter. They talked about chicken fat and things like that, and they had to shut it down because people got really concerned that these robots were going to start eating people. And so, I mean, there are, inherent concerns of all sorts of technology, but I don't think that that's necessarily a reason to ignore it. I think that, a culmination of all these things is the best way.
Yeah. Hey, Brent, I just want to add something. Yeah, Brent, I want to just add something real quick since you brought this up. For those of you out there, there's a book by an American philosopher, Ayn Rand, called Anthem. And the book starts off in this dystopian society. And the part of the premise is, well, you have this council of elders in this kind of completely impoverished society. And they took 50 years to finally approve the great technology breakthrough called the candle. And if you want a novel, it's a very short novel, by the way, but if you really want to sort of get the mindset of the precautionary principle, read Anthem by Ayn Rand. It's a fantastic little book.
Yes. Yes, Madam Ali.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that.
That's funny.
Yes.
Yeah, so
the libertarian perspectives, especially here. Sorry.
So, I think particularly in the medical field, it's amazing. And I think until we actually see things from a cellular level, we don't really understand things in the same way as we do when the scientists that do what they do. So, and I think, the way that we function is something that kind of is all of us, it's something that we all share as well. So I think it's, and because we're so connected with technology at the moment as well, it means that, we can share those kind of breakthroughs globally as well. So I think it's exciting in that respect for sure. So, but to be honest, it's not something that I'm really familiar with. Obviously, it kind of iPhones and everything work on nanotechnology, and it's incredible, how they work. I have no idea, how those little chips have that incredible ability to do what they do. So, it's really interesting. But it's always, I'm here really to learn and kind of absorb what's possible and, see everyone else's kind of applications of, how it might move forward. But no, for me, for sure, that's one of the problems when I've just written notes actually. When they were talking about the philosophy and how to be proactive or hold back, I also think one of the people that I held in a lot of self-esteem was David Suzuki, and he was a genetic scientist. And he got to the stage when he ethically didn't agree with what they were doing. So he set his own foundation up and stopped doing what he was doing. And essentially, I think some of the health problems even that we have because of the implications of things that we've done. So we all buy petrol, we all buy into petrochemical industry and drive cars, and and that pollutes the atmosphere, that in turn causes problems. And we're all stressed because of the lives that we lead, and that there's a correlation between that and heart disease and cancer. So essentially, that maybe the way that we've structured our society to constantly be running around and chasing our tails is kind of symptomatic to all those health issues. And the lockdown kind of brought a stop to that, so that so it's kind of maybe there's a the lockdowns and the way things have happened have made us rethink what happens, so that we live our lives slightly differently, so there's more of a life work balance. So and that nanotechnology obviously kind of keeps things, communications going, and it's kind of, so no, it's amazing what it can do. And it's not because no one's going to stop it anyway. It's just sometimes people need to think about the repercussions of what they do before they do it.
Yes.
And obviously they can't always determine those. So
Yes. Professor Edward, from this graph we are observing from USA government actually investing more on research and technology. I think US government investing $1.7 billion on nanotechnology, and they have different fields. So what your observation on this budget, and beside that, what is your advice, because we are heavily promoting our session with different government agencies in developing countries? What is your advice for them? We are observing from this graph in infrastructures, environment, and many places they are doing more research on nanotechnology. NASA and many organizations actually engage with that, and they are producing more technology.
Right. Well, I make an important distinction between very basic fundamental research and applications. Okay. That's crucial. In the United States, for example, if you want an analogy, there's we have an agency, DARPA, which is a defense agency that looks at various advanced technologies and promotes or funds basic research that a private company might not initially do. And you could look at what happened with the communications information revolution. DARPA was doing back in the 40s and 50s, were putting assets into some of this basic fundamental research for communications and information. And of course, they do it now with nanotechnology and many other things. But the other important thing is this. If you take a look at the communications and information revolution, a lot of that really was private entrepreneurs trying to figure out how to do stuff. It was Steve Jobs. It was the various pioneers. A lot of them, by the way, were in academia as well. The first real computer in the United States and was produced, I think it was the University of Philadelphia. And so a lot of it came out of academia and came out of private companies, and especially the applications. In other words, it's one thing to say, well, we have this interesting theoretical stuff, sort of micro machines, but how do you create these things? How do you create smartphones or computers or whatever? And mainly that's in the competition in the private sector, as well as with the input from academia. So what I'd say is be careful about putting too much emphasis on the government research. Keep it as open as possible. And in nanotechnology, again, it was in 1987 that Eric Drexler came out with his book, Engines of Creation. Again, if you want to see the foundational book in nanotechnology, Engines of Creation by Eric Drexler is what you want to look at. So he was working in this area well ahead of a lot of what the government was doing. And let me tell you the reason why I sound a cautionary note here. Right now in the United States, we're trying to expand access to the internet as quickly as possible. And right now, most people have access in one way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, what you're seeing in the budget right now, that's before our U.S. Congress, is a plan to put billions and billions of federal government dollars into fiber optics as a way to make sure that everybody has access to, they want to say 100% have access to 100 gigs of access. Well, first of all, most Americans don't need that much anyway. But the other thing is this: there are three fundamental technologies that we can use to communicate, to get on, to do what we're doing right now. Fiber optics is one, and it's a very good approach for concentrated areas, for a city, for example, where there's lots of people concentrated. Another way is Wi-Fi towers, 5G especially. I have 5G in my neighborhood here. That's the second way of providing access. The third way is what Elon Musk is doing literally as we speak, and that is Starlink, putting up satellites that can do the same sort of thing. Now, if you take a look at fiber optics, it costs something like $10,000 to $15,000 per mile to put one of these things. It's very, very expensive to do this, whereas just to have a satellite up there might be much, much cheaper. So if you want to provide, for example, people in rural Bangladesh, okay, or some rural area in the Asia Pacific area, rather than saying, let's spend billions and billions of dollars on fiber optics, it would be better just to go to Elon Musk and say, hey, Elon, you got a satellite up there? We want to use that satellite. The analogy here is with nanotechnology. What I worry about is I want to make sure that we don't have vested interests that get on, that look at just one kind of technology or one kind of production, a process for nanotechnology, and then the government essentially supports that at the exclusion of others, because it's the innovators who are trying to figure out how to use this stuff. And is this approach better? Or is this approach better? Or is this approach better? We have to keep as open a system as possible. So I say, make sure it's a mix. The governments are going to be putting money into some basic research, but it's the entrepreneurs who are going to figure out how to use the stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Ali.
Yeah. That's
we
really interesting, because I'm quite curious how the governments decide who they back and who they don't actually, and how they figure out who's at the forefront. Because essentially, I've worked on I was actually a chair of a recycling company in Warwickshire, and one of the things that was really interesting is that it was very obvious to me there was a lot of nepotism, and they knew what funding was coming up, and they'd apply for it or make sure that people that they were. So I wonder, kind of on a bigger scale, if that's what happens, and then that's not really a democratic, or and it's not necessarily getting to the people that are the best of the, it's just kind of making sure that the people that they know are kind of in the mix, really. So yeah, and it's interesting that individual entrepreneurs probably make incredible breakthroughs, but might not necessarily be networked unless they're savvy with the people that they need to know. So entrepreneurs need to be in the network, and I think social networks gives them that access that they otherwise didn't have before in a very real way, doesn't it? So yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Brentelman. I think definitely you come up with some different idea on nanotechnology, especially how the developing nations can work more on that and invest on that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's so many applications and things like that. I think that not holding ourselves back too much. I mean, I'm biased similarly to Edward here, in the sense that I am a very progressive, libertarian type individual. I kind of consider myself a bit of an accelerationist. So, my biases lead me to feel like they should just let it happen, and deal with the problems as they arise. Because, I mean, let's look at China, for instance, with our vaccinations and things like that. China really had strict control over the vaccines. They created one vaccine through the government research, and it has about a 50% efficacy rate. So, that's not the move. And, as Ali was saying, when the government does these things, how do they choose, who gets the contracts and this and that? It's a bureaucratic process that's not really necessarily as conducive to scientific research and breakthroughs as you might want to be, because their goals might not necessarily be to create a product, market it, and bring it, to the real world applications. Here in the United States, for instance, a big issue that we have regarding technology is the U.S. Patent Office. The U.S. Patent Office and, our national security apparatus has a vested interest in withholding patents from the public for national security purposes. And so there's tons of medical devices and things like that have been created that do not reach their way to the public. Because they see these as a threat. And I think that there's, some validity to it, but here in the United States, they're almost too safe. There's certain breakthroughs that, as Edward mentioned, DARPA's been working on tons of stuff in these types of arenas for a long time, decades. You do research and there's all sorts of nanotechnology stuff from the early 2000s, even back in the 80s and things like that. But at the end of the day, I think that there's, a healthy bit of skepticism's good. I'm not trying to, just truck along, but I think that the thing is people come and people try to restrict it, and so it's like, if the goal is to, complete these projects, you're going to deal with, roadblocks, no matter what it seems in this kind of society, even with the government, because that's part of the reason why the government does this stuff, is to have such strict control over these things. But, I think that the net benefit is there at the end of the day. And I think that if we really just try to lean in with, this fear and try to be restrictive, it's not really going to get us where we need to be. The world is exploding, population wise, technology wise, in so many ways. And holding these things back really doesn't have the long-term benefit that, skeptics might think it will, because you can't really stop progress. At the end of the day, you can just slow it down, and slowing it down is really a dangerous process in its own.
Excellent. Our friend Oshnakachi, I think he has many things he wants to share with us about nanotechnology, and definitely we know about what's going on inside Africa.
Okay, thank you for having me, and it's good speaking with Ed again. Brent, it's been a while, and Ali, it's good having you here. Okay, well, when I like listening to people who with better understanding of any topic. So when I came here and I saw Brent and Edward, I was super excited. Now, Ed is from the philosophical background, and I like it when he started talking about iron rings, and I think iron is one of the contemporary of Richard Feynman, who started nanotechnology in his book. There is plenty of room at the bottom. I think, Edward, am I correct? So
Yes.
the main
Ushnakati?
idea is the miniaturization. Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Now, yes.
So the main idea behind nanotechnology is the miniaturization of data and utilization of all these things in helping human deficiency, and that is the main idea. It's just as an open board, although there are moral challenges facing nanotechnology. We should not look at it that way, but in 2016 and 2006, when they started the research about nanotechnology in Nigeria, as reported by a professor of microbiology, Abaje Latif. Um, there've not been really some sort of progress in that niche. I think Egypt and South Africa have been doing well, but when you look at it, look at the present state of Nigeria as characterized by terrorism, lack of water, and all that, you see that we need things like this, because one of the key uh, 5 key benefits of nanotechnology is provision of clean water, solar energy. We don't have good electric power supply here. Talk about anti disease or disease disease detection and all that. And now that the world is plagued with the novel coronavirus and all that, like Edward D said, we shouldn't just leave it up to the government or allow the government to take care of everything. There should be room for social entrepreneurs who want to be part of the change agents. The idea of nanotechnology creates room for them to maximize the electoral resources within their reach. Now, let's look at Facebook, for instance. There was a challenge before this guy. There was a challenge before Mark. To circulate information easily, and Facebook emerged. If there is a problem or there is a failed system, a new one emerges. That is the idea in philosophy, and that is why things evolve in epochs, and it's making it more systemic. So if there is a challenge, there is a challenge. So it means that there is a friction, and it should be solved through these miniaturization of data or whatever information. And this cut across, when it said nanotechnology, it cut across all walks of life. It's not just innovation. We can bring it down to theories also. When you explain things in an easy way, people get to understand it better. So, and they will see a better formula of applying what you said to them. So, looking at Africa, as some villages here in Nigeria, they don't have electricity. Nanotechnology becomes the way to go. And so the government and other individuals, organizations and institutions, just like water, economic forum, taps and all that, that we can come together and say, this is what we need to do about this. It's quite a good avenue in making humanity better.
Okay. Okay. Professor Edward, like as you were discussing about US economy And most important thing is that USA is an open market economy, and many countries from developing nations, they are following the model of US. Like now many or corporations, even developing nations, they become big and they want to do more, invest on research. And you are also discussing on nanotechnology, how actually USA corporate work on nanotechnology, how they produce new technology, what type of technology they are doing, how different corporations from developing nations can collaborate with this corporation for new research and new innovation. Unmute, please.
Okay. I'm muted now, I think. Sorry about that. I'm very noisy. My kids are running around out there, and this is very domestic. I'll start off with a quick example to follow up on what Osi said. I'm looking right now at a story from some years ago, about 2010, nanotechnology for water purification, and it's about researchers in India investing in several different kinds of nanotechnology in order to provide better water filtration. I think they're looking at carbon nanotubes to do that. And the reason I bring that up is that at the beginning of this discussion, I mentioned that when you think of nanotechnology, you have to think about in several perspectives. First of all, basic research, which is the sort of thing that Eric Drexler was doing back starting decades ago, and which in fact corporations can invest in basic research, trying to figure out how to create better nanotech tools, for example, so that they can make little machines that can go in and, and deal with the diseases and such. And then the second thing is the applications of the nanotechnology, whether it's the materials or whatever. And so the role I see for American bigger corporations is in the basic research, which is also what the governments tend to do, because that's where you really do need some capital in order to do the basic research. So, for example, I don't know if the government of India was heavily involved in the example I just gave of nanotechnology used for water filtration. But you could see where that would be an area where they would be very interested, because in India, in Bangladesh, I certainly know the cases in Africa. One of the biggest serious health problems is bad water that causes diseases, and literally hundreds of thousands of children die each year because of water that has bacteria and other things in it. So you can understand why a government might want to put more money into that in a big corporation. The applications, though, do tend to be people like there's a gentleman in the United States, Dean Kamen, who's an inventor, a famous inventor, and who's invented a filtration system that can be used at a local level to filter water. One of the things, nanotechnology, though, in one sense, even though it's ubiquitous, we use nanotechnology without even realizing it in, for example, materials in our smartphones and so forth. But it's one of these areas where when you think of exponential technology, you usually think of genetic engineering. That's really important. You talk about robotics, you think about artificial intelligence, you think about big data. But that's why I was happy about this session, because a lot of times people ignore the importance of nanotechnology in terms of investment and so forth. What I would say to folks listening in the Asian Pacific area, and certainly since Osi is on the broadcast as well in Africa, is if you're a company in one of these countries, do whatever you can to create these international sort of research consortia. Because when you talk about globalization, there's a good side and the bad side. The bad side is the idea that governments should get together and globalize everything and create regulations for everything and so forth. And that just it just kills entrepreneurship. But the other is globalization, where you have folks in Nigeria and folks in Bangladesh and folks in Malaysia and companies working together. That's the model that has emerged in medical research. And we see, for example, American companies partnering with companies in Japan, companies in Canada. Of course, Canada's right next door to us, so it's I don't want to say it's practically the same thing, but it's pretty close. And you see these international consortia, so you can get the best from Japan and the best from American laboratories, and they can work together. And I see that potential with nanotechnology as well. So if I were a company in the Asia Pacific area, I'd look for those possibilities to partner with companies in the United States, and there's some other countries where you see this sort of research done as well. But the other thing is, I would say, make sure that you diversify, keep a diversified portfolio, so to speak, because it's not just nanotech, it's all of the other things that we've discussed, all the other technologies. Nanotech is one technology, and there are many others. So make sure that you have a diversified research portfolio, so to speak.
Thank you. Madam Ali, you are from UK, and UK has different structure. I think Malaysia and UK governments and the social structure almost same. So how actually your government work on that, or your corporations or other organizations working on this nanotechnology?
Because
What
I
is
think
the
that in England, it seems like we are quite. When you were talking about holding back so that we follow regulations and keep people safe, it seems like we go through that process quite stringently before we do anything. So there's a nanotechnology centre in London that's innovating and kind of it's quite high in the field. But I think generally, I think as a nation, even I was talking to people the other day, and even keeping our children safe online, there's regulations so our children can't be on social networks with adults to keep them safe. And I found out that in America they can. So essentially, we safeguard our children for, so that that we know who they're talking to in a different way. And I naturally assume that everybody did that. So essentially, I think there's a safeguarding that kind of safeguarding happens culturally as well. So and we're also culturally, I would say, which really frustrates me, is we're a very permissive society. So we train our children to keep asking permission for everything. And what's really interesting is my mum was a head teacher and an Ofsted inspector, and education's very ingrained in me. But I've deliberately innovated to make sure that children realise that they have to make their own choices and innovate and do things because they know it will work, and they need to take risk. It's kind of, so essentially, I think one of the things culturally is, that nanotechnology thing, that you have to be proactive. And in some ways, you have to identify where the problems are. And if nanotechnology can resolve them, that's the way to go, isn't it? It's kind of, so essentially, they need to have applications, not because whoever is inventing them wants them to work, but they're solving issues. So I think they need to be purpose driven, so that they are actually meeting something that has a bigger implication. And it's not just about how much money they create, but how much value that whatever it is they create has. So. Did I answer the question properly? Because our culture is very different, which is why I love being on the west coast of the States, because that was at the other end of the scale to my experience, in England. And it's a shame that you can't marry the two together, So I think that's why this forum's incredible, because it brings, incredible people together that have very different cultural backgrounds. Yeah.
Thank you. Oshnakachi, can you hear me? Oshnakachi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes, there is a question from audience. What is the scope of nanomaterials in the underprivileged country? So I think you can,
Yes. But actually, when we talk about underprivileged country, we refer to Africans as underprivileged countries. It makes us to feel helpless. It's just that there is no system put in place for all these things to come to be. When you look at Africa, Africa is blessed with mineral and natural resources. It's all about intelligence, sufficient intelligence, and as a rational being, we are in the same space or whatever. No one is privileged or underprivileged or more privileged than the other. So development, for me, developed country or development, it is dependent on one's level of consciousness. So the going back to the question asked, it's all about coming together, the sense of crowdfunding and area of interest. Take for instance, if I pick up the task of making sure that we have kind of clean water in the area that I live, like we did, there was an interview that what do we call it, virtual enlightenment salon, where we are talking about providing clean water for Ghanaians. So a question was asked, uh, why can't we look for a way of manufacturing those machines in Ghana with little resources? I mean, with little resources, we can study them, open a hub, teach people how to manufacture the equipment, so the materials that we use in providing all these things, instead of looking for a way of importing United States, that considering cost and the risk of damaging those machines. So it's all about interest. When we identify a problem, when you identify a problem, you set up a way of solving it. Then people with interest, if I bring my $1, you get your $1, we put it together, that's crowdfunding, instead of waiting for government who will not come to solve that problem. And we look for a way of miniaturization, a way of inventing or manufacturing a thing, equipment that will help us in solving that problem. The most important thing is sensitization and creating more awareness for people to understand the relevance or the benefits of nanotechnology. So, anyone with zero knowledge of nanotechnology will not like to contribute, because the person will look at the negative effect of nanotechnology, look at the danger that it projects. The person won't look at the benefits. So, like when you look at what some persons think of nanotechnology, consider they don't consider the the benefit. They look at the risk that it accrues. Only the benefits goes for it. Only those who understand what it really is goes for it. I've discussed these things in the past, and the people see it as something that is disruptive to their faith and belief. When you look at third world countries and all that, they hold their faith sacrosanct, and anything that they see as a threat to their faith becomes bad. So it has to do with a sensitization, and a kind of awareness that we did in Rwanda in 2019 through our techno-scientific awareness campaign.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Brent, there is a question for you from Noor Fazrin. Thank you for your questions. What is the major goal of nanotechnology? So,
Sure. That's honestly a pretty tough one to answer, just because there's so many goals. I mean, the major goal, I guess, would be to be able to do things at a scale that's nano. Be able to do things at the tiniest of levels. And yeah, I mean, but what that means, is, are we dealing with biotechnology research, pharmaceutical research, different types of technology like phones and things like that, or food. I mean, there's nanotechnology, there's intercochlear nanotechnology implants to help give people back their hearing. There's stuff in retinas to help give people back their sight. And then there's stuff with food. You can have nanotechnology that identifies different bacterias or contaminants and things like that. There's really diverse applications in nanotechnology that can build different organs and things like that. Like I had mentioned, these xenobots that integrate our own cellular, genetics and DNA and things like that into these devices, so that they're able to go into our body without our body attacking them, without our, blood cells, trying to destroy them as some kind of thing that shouldn't be there. So, I mean, there's tons of different purposes and applications of nanotechnology. But I think that, the number one goal would probably be to just help progress our technological supremacy level, and help keep pushing the bar higher. Edward probably has more to say there, though.
Yes,
Well,
yes. I want to add one question. I know Professor Edward has more answers, but Ali Ahmed, thank you for your question. What is the contribution of nanotechnologies in the health sector? Because everybody now careful about healthcare system, and yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yes.
Okay. By the way, if those of you watching the live streaming, the way the sun is coming behind Ali, it looks like a halo around her head. It looks like she's a saint. And I'd like to say that simply confirms my evaluation of her. So just as an empirical observation, I'm an empiricist. Okay, so I'm just making this point. But
makes sense.
But in terms of the goal of nanotechnology, what's the goal of a hammer? What's the goal of a saw? What's the goal? It's a tool. Nanotechnology is a tool. It's the ability to manufacture or create machines at a micro level. As Osi pointed out, it started with a famous speech by Richard Feynman. There's lots of room at the bottom, and it's a tool that can be used for all sorts of things. And the medical area, which the question asked about, is one of the primary areas. And I think I mentioned earlier in the broadcast that nanofibers being used right now in an experimental artificial kidney, someday in the not too distant future, could eliminate the need for dialysis machines because of using that particular materials. As Brent has observed, some of these nanobots that can go into your body can target cells, can literally deliver treatments or medications or whatever at the cellular level, or can go through the blood-brain barrier. The brain is very, very well protected, as well it should be. And so if you create a nanobot that can go through the blood-brain barrier and deliver treatments to the brain, then suddenly you open up a whole medical area of dealing with such serious problems as Alzheimer's or Parkinson's, and that sort of thing. In the lungs, there's a possibility of using little respiratory nanotech things. The other thing about nanotechnology is that the nanobots, so to speak, are self-replicating. Now, some people see that as a danger, as Eric Drexler has pointed out, and some people are afraid of so-called gray goo. That is, you can create these bots that basically go out and reproduce themselves and eat everything, including us. But on the other hand, when you put them in the body, they can reproduce, and presumably, if you have exactly the right kind of nanobots, well, you can wipe that cancer out. And that might be a tool. Now, by the way, I want to put this in context, because I've spoken on these shows before about genetic engineering. And so that's another way that does not involve nanotechnology to deal with health issues. And I mentioned, I think that 2 or 3 weeks ago, there was a very important announcement that hardly anybody appreciates. And that is that there's a genetic editing tool, the CRISPR-Cas9 editing tool. What this tool can do is go into a cell and cut out a piece of genetic material, perhaps a piece of genetic material that is suspected to be associated with some disease. What the breakthrough has been able to do is go in and turn on or off how genetic material expresses itself, so to speak. And why is that important? Because the experiments are being done on the tau protein. The tau protein in the neurons, is a protein that's associated with clumping together, which causes Alzheimer's. So now we have a technology that might be able to literally turn off the expression of a gene that would cause this tau protein, meaning we can turn off the genes that cause Alzheimer's. Now, why am I bringing that up in the context of nanotechnology? I'm bringing it up because, going back to the original question, the purpose of nanotechnology is it as a tool. It's one of many tools. The CRISPR-Cas9 editing process is a tool. So is nanotechnology. So think of it that way. Think of nanotechnology as a tool and by the way, just to bring the discussion back to the sainted Ali here, she talks about the full human being. And OC, with a philosophy background, I think is in agreement about the importance of the whole person. And so when you think of technology, again, think of it as in the whole of human life and how it can help you live a better life.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Madam Ali.
Okay, so yeah,
Yes.
I agree because they're looking at ways of harnessing energy, aren't they, from light and things like that, and movement, and so it's kind of it's exciting and fighting diseases on a cellular level that we don't have any, we don't have any cures for at the moment. It's really amazing as well. So, yeah. So I think that there just needs to be a balance in everything, and essentially we're still quite reliant on the planet we live in and the air that we breathe and the clean water. So and one of the problems is that people still don't have in Africa, not everyone has clean water supplies. And it's not because there isn't enough on the world as there, it's that we haven't kind of got the technology in place to enable things to happen. So yeah, so I think it's interesting that it's kind of got the implications to improve things, but sometimes development isn't always progress. It's tearing down huge forests to build something isn't necessarily great for us. It's kind of so I think sometimes we have to ask why the progress is, whether it is really progress or not. So yeah.
Thank you, Oshnagachi.
Okay. So my suggestion is this: why should we try to push these ideas to various continents? We should also have in mind that there are cultural backgrounds, there are people with works for
You're breaking up a
Oshnagachi.
little.
Yes, Oshnagachi.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, there is a noise from. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Okay, so I was trying to say that why to push these ideas to people, we need to do a kind of enculturation. We need to know what works for them, because sometimes when you think that this works for people, when you think for people what works for them, we make a lot of mistakes. Now it becomes a kind of imposition. If you come to Africa now, we know what works for us, especially elites. So we know, let it not be like what is happening currently in Nigeria, just like what the British government did in the past, amalgamating people of different tribes and causing confusions. So, but now we were that's in the past. But now we now have this sense of self-realization, and that same wrong idea is being passed among these analog leaders. They don't understand what nanotechnologies are. They don't understand the relevance and benefits. So, but when we look at it from the cultural perspective, when we look at it from the people's way of thinking, their pattern, easier for them to fit in, and it will be easier for them to make sense of this whole thing about nanotechnology. So now it becomes imperative that we should emphasize more on teaching people about nanotechnology than the usage of nanotechnology. That should be the foundation of us pushing, having a curriculum for that in high school, university level. Because here, basically, they don't talk about it in high school in Nigeria. So there should be courses developed for nanotechnology, and we are going to look at that for Academy of the Future. And it's one of the things that I outline so that people can easily get courses on that, have basic knowledge of it, so that it will be easier for them when they meet it in the advanced level.
Thank you, Mr. Brentelman.
Thank you. Yeah, Edward was talking about using the whole scope of humanity, and I think holistic, the holistic nature of defense. When it comes to the medical world and things like that. I say it. I see these cell phones as they're natural. This is a natural end result of evolution. Not ants and monkeys and bears aren't making cell phones, but humans are natural, organic. We are part of the holistic spectrum that is nature. So these types of technologies are indeed part of that. And so I think that, as Ali said, there's certain aspects of human progress and, industrialization that are not necessarily conducive to the betterment of society and, improving upon our environment and things like that. But I think that the best way to help mitigate these types of issues that progress and industrialization creates is through more progress. I don't think that unplugging the machines is going to really fix our problems necessarily. And so I think that in order to have that perspective of holistic care, I think that we really need to integrate all of these different aspects. And I think that ignoring things like meditation and yoga would obviously be, of course, not be full spectrum, but on the other end of the spectrum, ignoring these other technological breakthroughs as well would be a bit it's just limiting ourselves unnecessarily. And so that's kind of and I recognize that calling a cell phone organic and natural is extreme, but I'm all right with that.
Thank you. I directly have to go for the concluding remarks for today. This is really good session. Especially, I request the policymakers, even the universities, school, college, and the corporation, those who are connecting with World Talent Economy Forum, share our content. This is very important because how Professor Edward and other panelists actually give us the guideline about nanotechnology. This is the open dialogue. This is the way we should provide guidelines to our government and corporations and universities, how they can do more research. So World Talent Economy Forum, we are more focused on economy, but definitely we are thinking about the futuristic idea. We are thinking about how we can improve in the futures. And most important thing is that in the COVID-19 situation, we need a lot more collaboration. The more we can collaborate with the developed nations, we can get more success. Even many countries, they are from different countries, they are struggling with vaccine. They have a lot of challenges right now. So only we can, if we can make a proper global relationship, globalize like platform, then we can solve many things. So that is the objective of World Talent Economy Forum. And beside that, we have our summit on futuristic leaderships, 29th and 30th May. So I invite you all to join in this session. Beside that, we are inviting a lot more volunteers, as well as we are organizing our committee with a lot of ambassadors and the scientific member like Professor Edwards and the other panelists. So by this way, we will create a really knowledge-based community, and those who can help a lot of corporations and small medium enterprise, the startup, as well as government to make a sustainable ecosystem in the COVID-19 situation. That is our objective. And share our content as much as possible. Subscribe our YouTube channels, and we are going for the fundraising options. So we have our PayPal account, presidentwtforum@gmail.com. You can support our initiative. We have our Patreon account. You can support our initiative. And this is our commitment that we want to support more on developing economy, because we have to develop more. We have to develop sustainable ecosystem. And with the collaborations of developed nations, those who are very much open-minded, those who have a lot of research, a lot of innovation, who can help us, and we can grow together in this way. So I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. First, I want to start from Professor Edward, then Madam Ali, then Oshnakachi, and finally Mr. Brentelman. Professor Edward.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. And this has been an excellent session. And by the way, in terms of being a full integrated human being, I also want to recommend a recent book called The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. And Stephen Kotler has been the partner of Peter Diamandis, who was the founder of Singularity University, the the X Prize, the Space X Prize. And so if you're really interested in improving yourself as an individual so you can use all these incredible technologies, you can check out Stephen's new book. But this has been an excellent session. Again, I would say in terms of nanotechnology, it is one of the handful of exponential technologies that is redefining science, is defining our economies in the future, and is going to be defining, hopefully, our culture and our society with the applications. I would say that if you're an entrepreneur or if you're a researcher, especially in the Asian Pacific area, it's something you need to understand. It is one of the many technologies, I mentioned a couple of them, robotics, artificial intelligence, biohacking, communications and information. It's one of a number of these technologies that are very important. But remember, nanotechnology is a tool, just like any other tool. And you can take a tool and you can figure out how to apply it in one situation or another. You have to be open about how to do this and what the opportunities are. I suspect in the future that it's going to be the entrepreneurs who produce the technology that allows us to do this broadcast right now that are going to figure out ways of using nanotechnology, whether producing new materials so we can build a space elevator in Sri Lanka, going all the way up to outer space, as Arthur C. Clarke suggested, or doing the kinds of medical breakthroughs that we've discussed on the show. It's going to be entrepreneurs who figure out how to do that. It's going to be researchers at universities who do a lot of the basic research. So inform yourself about this technology. Perhaps read Eric Drexler's breakthrough book, Engines of Creation, and it will certainly benefit you because this is a very exciting.
Thank you, Madam Ali.
Okay, so from my perspective, so obviously technology is not going to go away, but I think it's our human potential that we should actually look at, and the nanotechnology should kind of enable us to maybe solve problems and things like that, but our human potential to kind of create a sustainable ecosystem that's a natural one first, because I think it's really interesting to keep looking at the economics of things and thinking that ecosystem is the thing that we rely on, and we rely on that for finance, but the biodiversity of the world, and that's what we really rely on. If there was no air, so it's kind of, and I just think that there's kind of a macro and micro scale to everything. So it's fascinating that we can miniature, and that we've come so far that we can make these miniature things that replicate themselves, and but the human body and our potential is also incredible, and sometimes we haven't really explored individuals' potential. So I think the power of the individual is just as important in the picture of the whole thing. And I deeply believe that everyone's kind of got a purpose to be here, and that they're here for a reason. So so I think and they're part of they're a part of a much bigger web of life. So it's eradicating life around us so we can start genetically engineering meat or something isn't necessarily a solution, is it? So and I worry about people having chips so that they're or putting information in their brains, so that they're that they've got those, so that they're not thinking for themselves. So, I worry about where it's all going to go if technology is so progressive that we dehumanize ourselves, and humanity is kind of fundamental to life and well-being and happiness, isn't it? And that's why we're so I've got 2 children. I want them to go into a world that's beautiful and has nature to look at. I don't want them to live in smart cities when they never see a flower grow or a tree. So yeah, there you go. That's my
Thank you. Oshnagati.
Okay, I need to thank you for this wonderful opportunity to take World Talent Economic Forum. And one of the important things I would like to say before leaving is the application of nanotechnology in the future of farming, which is that be it aquaponics or agroponics, is really will be of great important for us to reduce this sense of chemically engineered foods. All these things are not good for health. Uh, we need to encourage and promote vertical farming so the people can have some set of natural food. We need to go back to taking more of natural foods than chemical foods. So, because if you look at the danger, one of the dangers are for cancers and um, of what shortens the lifespan is the intake of chemical engineered foods. So we need naturally, and nanotechnology will help us to help us in doing that. So there is one thing that I normally tell people: if you want to be a good security expert, learn how to think like a thief, and people need to have that at the back of their mind. You must learn how to know both the good and bad side of nanotechnology, and that's become fundamental. What the uh, so Aristotle was talking about, right? Defining what education really is. So we must learn how to break people out from, especially people from this side of the world, from the shackles of not knowing what nanotechnology really is. But for me, I think they have been practicing nanotechnology before now, not knowing. So, and if you look at Richard Feynman and his explanation of what nanotechnology in his book, there's plenty of room at the bottom. He drew so many pictures. He showed so many pictures um, uh, of the many ancient pictures pointing out experimentation and the usage of nanotechnology in the past. So, which means some persons have been using nanotechnology with that to more awareness of its importance and relevance like this 21st century. And it will also play a good role in the time of disruptive technology. Most of us have been experiencing most economies. So, we need to encourage that to promote that.
Okay, Ushnakachi, thank you, Mr. Brent Elben. How? What's your concluding remarks? The few comments from the audience, like my friend Mr. Saros from Sri Lanka, he said that maybe World Bank can contribute for this research collaboration from the developed nations and developing nations. And I don't know, it's actually Facebook thinks what happened to Bill Gates nanochips. Anyway, I think it's some sort of different, like, yeah, okay. Brent Elben.
I think that that's an important thing to point out, though. Bill Gates' nanochip. I think that there's a lot of hasty assumptions that people make. And then, oh, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, great. Yeah, I think that there's a lot of fears and concerns that people have. I think that one of the biggest fears and concerns that people have is that people who are techno progressives don't have fears and concerns. But I think that that's really short-sighted, because I think that nobody really wants to be the guy that blew up the world. I think that these types of false notions and these false concepts and like Bill Gates nanochips and things like that, they reverberate faster than real technology in today's day and age, because fear is such a catalyst for conversation and for interest, and it just stirs up so much in us, and so I think that it's totally incredibly natural for us to have these fears. And if you look at the history of things like nanotechnology, it's been fear that's guided the whole direction of this type of technology and these types of research. And so I think that, again, these fears are valid in many ways, but if we're going to utilize the full spectrum of human potential, this is it. This is a big part of it. These types of progresses, are absolutely directly related to human potential. We are, as Edward said, animals that use tools. And so to kind of ignore that notion, is kind of suppressing human nature in a way, in my opinion. And I think that the idea that we're going to transition from a world where we have nature to suddenly move away from nature altogether, I think is also not necessarily an accurate assessment. I think that that's a valid concern without a doubt, but I think that humanity is incredibly diverse. As I very techno-progressive transhumanist, but nature holds a very dear place in my heart. I've spent months at a time in the deserts in Utah on separate occasions, multiple times. I really appreciate nature. I could go either way. I love this, futuristic stuff, but if you throw me in the woods, I'll survive. I know how to make fire with sticks and things like that. So it's not that I have any disdain towards nature. And then again, there are absolutely, self-proclaimed post-humanists that see nature as an issue, as a problem that needs to be overcome, because nature is defined in part by destruction, entropy, systems that run out of fuel and such. And so I think that there's, valid concerns that, there are certain parts of nature that aren't necessarily the most conducive to health, for the full spectrum of nature and society, animals, humans, plants, things like that. There's all sorts of things that are constantly trying to strive to maintain homeostasis, but there's not really anything else on our planet more capable of pushing things in different directions than humanity and our our progress that we've been making. And so I think that that's valid to consider. And so I think that it's been a great conversation today, though. Really, really interesting stuff. And again, Sharif, always a pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you everyone for joining today's session, World Talent Economy Forum. We are open for collaborations because we need more collaborations, more partnerships, and we want to do more work together with our global community. Thank you. It's really, really great sessions, and share our content as much as possible. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.